Dyslexia is because of being a dyslexic person myself. I feel like I really understand that we have a responsibility to change the
Princess Beatrice is at the center of a very emotional occasion as the family finds itself in a contentious situation once more. As she made a startling disclosure regarding her father, Prince Andrew, she started crying. Why is it so much worse than anyone had anticipated? And what specifically did she tell that even her closest friends and family were in disbelief? Come along as we reveal the devastating truth about Princess Beatrice's tearful admission about her father and why she is a unique kind of princess that is far worse than we initially believed. As Prince Andrew's first child and seventh in line for the throne, Princess Beatrice has been expected to endure constant public scrutiny from her birth in 1988. Like many other royals, she was expected to carry out royal obligations and attend public events throughout her youth. But Beatrice never showed the traits of a princess who would settle for a life that was limited to following royal rules. She expressed a desire to learn more about the world beyond palace walls. Unlike other members of the royal family, Beatrice was not sent to exclusive boarding schools from an early age. After starting her schooling at Ascot St. George's School, she went on to study history at Goldsmiths University of London. Despite attending several royal engagements with her parents and younger sister, Princess Eugenie, Beatrice opted to explore possibilities unrelated to royal obligations. She also interned at Sony Pictures to gain expertise in the film industry. She participated in corporate projects and sought employment in business development and finance. Beatrice found that establishing her professional identity was just as crucial as preserving her royal identity. In fact, she might have been even more so when she briefly relocated to New York, where she might have lived like a star. Rather, she maintained a low profile and even adopted the name in a city where people see celebrities every day. Beatrice York managed to live a relatively inconspicuous and undetected existence, immerse herself in her career, and hone her professional talents and make acquaintances outside of the elite royal circle. This was in contrast to the royal custom of staying close to the United Kingdom and adhering to carefully chosen regulations. Even in her humanitarian endeavors, Beatrice took a personal approach. She selected issues that were close to her heart, such as mental health advocacy, education, dyslexia, and awareness. For her, being truly involved was more important than simply turning up for a picture. Because her personal life followed a similar trend, she listened and even shared personal experiences when she went. Beatrice was able to keep her affair with real estate entrepreneur Eduardo Mapelli Mozzi quiet in its early stages when they got married during the epidemic in 2020. Despite the fact that royal relationships frequently take place in front of paparazzi, the lavishly televised royal weddings of the past were not like this one. Only close relatives and friends attended the modest private ceremony, and the couple decided to post just a few official photos rather than allowing it to be widely publicized. Even as a mother, her penchant for solitude is evident when she gave birth to her daughter in 2021. Although it was well publicized, everything was kept under wraps, seemingly to indicate that Beatrice wished to raise her family away from the constant spotlight that comes with being a royal. Although Beatrice continued to attend family events such as weddings and christenings and other occasions where her attendance was required, it is evident from her other decisions, whether they were personal, professional, or charitable, that she desired more than her position. Additionally, they demonstrated how Beatrice was subtly reinventing what it may mean to be a contemporary princess, not completely constrained by tradition, but also not rejecting her ancestry. Her primary goal was to manage both lives without causing harm to either. She was seen by many as an approachable princess who could wear a title without allowing it to completely define her. People who believe that contemporary royals need to work, pay their own expenses, and experience life outside of the privileged cocoon in a family that is frequently condemned for being out of touch found her way of life appealing. Beatrice had some credibility because of her sympathetic style. For years, it seemed as though she had managed to create a life that was both modern and traditional. But this balance was more flimsy than it seemed because, despite her independence, Beatrice was still a part of a family that was constantly watched by the public. In the royal world, no amount of personal privacy can fully protect you when a storm is brewing. What happens when the life she had worked so hard to create collides with an uncontrollable family crisis? When everything changed in the fall of 2019, a storm made its appearance, threatening not only her father's reputation, but also tearing at the edges of the life she had so meticulously constructed. The scandal started when American financier Jeffrey Epstein was arrested at his New York home in early July 2019 on suspicion of trafficking children. The names of influential individuals connected to him immediately came to light after his arrest unlocked a Pandora's box of investigation. Prince Andrew's was one of the names. It wasn't until November 2019 that Prince Andrew sat down for a broadcast interview on BBC Newsnight, despite the fact that tabloids went crazy and the media started asking the royal family for explanations. He intended to diffuse the escalating issue around his affiliation with Jeffrey Epstein during that interview. Rather, it set off one of the most spectacular royal backfires that have ever occurred. His uneasiness and a few snide remarks immediately drew criticism from around the world. He asserted, for instance, that a victim couldn't be speaking the truth since he was unable to perspire because of a medical problem. That remark felt like adding fuel to already scorching headlines rather than containing the damage, and it shown little empathy for the victim. However, in January 2022, the legal ground beneath him changed, marking the true turning point. U.S. courts inflicted another blow. A judge denied Andrew's request to have a civil abuse case against Virginia Giuffre, who accused him of grave mistreatment while she was a minor, dismissed. The public was taken aback by the court's decision. They had anticipated something different from someone so privileged, but the court demonstrated that everyone is subject to the law. But the tension was evident beneath the news reports and court documents. Beatrice found herself enmeshed in a world that was fiercely colliding with the scandal surrounding her father. It suddenly seemed difficult to maintain the deliberate distance from controversy that had earlier defined her existence. The atmosphere felt more constrained even when she attended events. She took more deliberate steps. Brick by brick, she had constructed her life, and suddenly the earth trembled. The family was rocked by every new development, such as the court summons and the loss of royal powers. It was more than just how the general public perceived identity, survival, and allegiance. Although speaking up came with its own hazards, Beatrice felt that the balance she had so carefully maintained was shifting, making the safety of remaining silent seem less and less viable. Anything she had managed to preserve intact could be destroyed by these dangers. The disclosure was intensely emotional in addition to being legal and damaging to one's image. Everything she had achieved was eclipsed now by a scandal she didn't cause. And no matter how she attempted to separate herself, the issue followed her everywhere. She must have felt as though she was standing within her own image at moments, frantically attempting to prevent it from breaking. Each court case brought against her father seemed like a slap in the face of the foundation she had created. His name was in every headline, penetrating more into her well-defended world. How long, though, can silence keep the barriers she's created from collapsing? The quiet amid the chaos, Princess Beatrice had to cope with charges she had not made and decisions she had not made in the months following the controversy. Because of the guy she still called Father Beatrice, who was aware of the power of the press, her name was suddenly appearing in headlines that had nothing to do with her business or charitable endeavors. She had, after all, been raised in a time when royal children were photographed before they were even able to walk. But this was different. This wasn't the innocuous curiosity of tabloids making romantic or fashion-related predictions. Since the family name she was born with was now associated with this worldwide scandal with a criminal undertone, Her initial inclination was to remain silent, not because she had nothing to say, but rather because she understood that even the simplest comment could be twisted and used as a weapon by the press. She observed as every sentence her father attempted to utter in his own manner. Outrage at defense increased. If she talked, would she be accused of defending him? Would she be labeled disloyal if she separated herself? Beatrice didn't appear to be safe in any position. The unknown was the most terrifying aspect. The allegations against her father weren't just unpleasant, they were widespread and related to a man whose death in prison further heightened public distrust. She wasn't only waiting for negative publicity to pass, there was no obvious route out of the storm she was living in. Family loyalty was no longer the only factor at play here. It has to do with protecting oneself. Every action she took and every silence she maintained was calculated. And as the days went by, she came to the realization that she could no longer control the conversation about her father, but perhaps she could still control her life. But could she, if the scandal had already permeated every part of her life? How could she possibly insulate herself from what was coming next? When the alarming comment was originally reported by the media, nobody thought it was true. It was nearly impossible to imagine Princess Beatrice, who had kept resolutely quiet while the world ripped her father apart, writing a letter to express her sentiments. However, by the time specific passages started making the rounds in the media, it was obvious that the princess was the source. The letter was rendered even more combustible by the fact that it was intended to be sent confidentially to a friend rather than for public consumption. Beatrice had kept up a sort of regal discipline for years. She never publicly contradicted her father, and she never raised any questions about how long ago she wrote this letter. It implied that there had been a price for silence. The lyrics painted a picture of a lady who felt imprisoned by the very organization she was born into, unable to express herself freely, but also unable to completely hide her feelings. People were convinced as they read it that it was more than just a publicity gimmick. It was written with an unfake vulnerability, and it was as emotional as Beatrice's remarks. Beatrice expressed her emotions in the letter. She began by saying that she was heartbroken by the impact the results had on her family, and that she realized they would likely never move on from the situation because it wasn't a straightforward issue. Her father might have been in prison for years for that kind of thing. She expressed in her writing how she felt as if she had lost control of her family name. She no longer carried it with pride, but rather as a burden that might
be turned into a weapon by others. She had spent her entire life trying to define herself, yet all it took to drag her into a quagmire she had no business in was her last name. She then talked about the conflict she had to deal with since she was devoted to her father, but also wary of the victims. She stated it was intolerable how much his own behavior had impacted her life and her kids, whom she had done everything in her power to protect. Beatrice acknowledged that she feared her father's decisions would irreversibly damage both her own future in the royal family and his legacy. The purpose of titles was to act as a shield. It felt like a target to her now. In the letter, she expressed her concern out loud that she might never again be able to enter a room without someone silently associating her face with his humiliation. Despite this, there remained steadfast and unwavering loyalty between the rifts of hurt and frustration. She made it plain that she still saw the man who had brought her up, not only the one who had been demolished by the media. She also gave her sister Eugenie credit for her unwavering support of Andrew. Eugenie had not been quiet as Beatrice had. She had publicly demonstrated her allegiance to her father by going to events with Andrew and walking with him when the media was unforgiving. But Beatrice thought the whole matter was convoluted. Eugenie thought her public endorsement was a loving gesture. If the leaked letter revealed anything, it was that Beatrice could have a deep affection for her father while still questioning the decisions that brought him to the point where his name was the main storyline for such a scandal. The letter sparked a frenzy when it got to the press. The tabloids didn't need confirmation, but the palace refused to respond. They went crazy, analyzing every word and every feeling. Some dressed it up as grief and labeled it a betrayal. For others, it was an act of bravery. As the letter spread outside the circle, the question that lingered was whether Beatrice was this close to breaking the law and what would happen to her father at that point. After all, it was the first time a senior royal had dared to acknowledge the personal cost of the Epstein scandal within the family walls. When the Epstein controversy finally got out of hand, The royal family's tolerance for not being a prince finally ran out, and Buckingham Palace's walls didn't simply close in. The previously inviolable status of Prince Andrew caused them to completely crumble. He had been protected by royal privilege for decades. His title as a royal highness, military decorations, and ceremonial roles were all as much a part of who he was as his family name. However, in early 2022, that identity started to fall apart at an alarming rate. When the Queen unexpectedly called her son to Windsor Castle in January 2022, Andrew entered as a prince of the realm and left without any royal patronages, military titles, or the ability to utilize his royal highness in any official capacity. The family was taken aback by this, but before they could process it, the world was informed. Given the extent of the harm, the Queen probably made the snap decision to cut ties between Andrew and the monarchy. But it broke Andrew, even though it saved the crown some face. He had previously worked for the monarchy for many years, but now it was practically dragging him under. Universities re-examined their ties to his esteemed business mentoring program, Pitch at Palace, while corporations withdrew their support from organizations associated with him. Institutions and businesses promptly followed suit. The fallout was also somewhat difficult financially. Andrew lost a lot of clout in the nonprofit world after his patronages ended, and rumors circulated about how he would pay for his defense. Financial arrangements were reportedly arranged behind the scenes, and he had begun selling his own properties. It was a long cry from the times when he felt at ease in high society, certain of his position in the top echelons of both British and international society. Most telling of all, the controversy put an imperceptible barrier between him and the monarchy's destiny. It was reported that the then heir to the throne, Prince Charles, was adamant on simplifying the royal family's public functions. There was no place for Andrew in this arrangement. According to reports, Prince William shared the belief that the monarchy couldn't afford more harm to its reputation and that public trust was brittle. However, Andrew wasn't the only one who fell from grace. The rift and the need to release him would have a cascading effect, altering not just his life but the future of the entire royal family. More than just the downfall of a single royal, the internal upheaval and the Prince Andrew affair served as the catalyst for a change that the monarchy was unable to postpone. Prince Charles's long-discussed plan to reduce the size of the monarchy suddenly gained urgency after his expulsion from public life forced the royal family to face a question it had long avoided. How could it continue to be respected and relevant in a world where accountability was demanded and secrecy was dying? The stakes were obvious from the fallout. Every scandal eroded the centuries-old confidence between the crown and the nation, and the public's patience was finite. Every working royal had to have a purpose that the public could understand, support their job via service, and keep up an image that could stand up to the constant scrutiny of contemporary media. In order to fill the void left by Andrew's absence, this new vision called for fewer public roles for members of the extended family, stricter control over appearances, and a greater emphasis on the direct line of succession. Even adored figures like Princess Anne were expected to take on more work, and the family calendar changed the balcony at trooping and made the color look less crowded. An older, more expansive royal era was also coming to an end, even though this resulted in a neater, more controlled image. The shift was not without internal conflict. Charles's insistence on efficiency and optics occasionally ran counter to the more traditional family instincts of older royals. William and Harry's strained relationship made it difficult to present a united front, and the Queen, known for her devotion to family, had to endure the agonizing necessity of publicly separating herself from her own son. However, the message was clear. Discipline, not emotion, was what would ensure the monarchy's existence. Even those who were born into the House of Windsor might be expelled in this new world if their behavior put the organization in danger. A lesson would reverberate from Prince Andrew's fall, which served as a warning. Therefore, the true harm was hidden within the royal gates for years to come, despite all the public humiliation. Although the royal family may have seen the termination of Prince Andrew's royal responsibilities as a political move, his nuclear family's way of life had been upended. The father of his daughters, Princess Eugenie and Princess Beatrice, had formerly been the Queen's favorite son. They now had to face the harsh reality that you might be banished by public opinion long before you are exiled by official proclamation. These days, there is an implicit inquiry at every public gathering or charity event, should they still be spotted next to him. Even the Duchess of York, Sarah Ferguson, was forced to defend Andrew, not as a husband but as a man, a role she hadn't held in decades. She continued to call her relatives. Even after their divorce, their uncommon intimacy sparked criticism and conjecture, but she refused to officially leave him, since her quiet was not loyalty but rather capitulation to the monarchy, and Andrew's banishment served as a warning. No royal, no matter how near the throne, was untouchable for the following generation if the Queen could deprive her own son of titles and responsibilities. It was a disturbing message. The institution would defend itself before it defends you. However, the lesson was much more intimate for the York family. Unspoken tension would now be a part of every summer gathering at Balmoral or every Christmas at Sandringham. They were handling more than just a scandal. Its ghost was residing with them, and ghosts hardly ever die in the monarchy. How do you feel about the announcement made by Princess Beatrice? Do you believe the royal family made the correct choice? Please let us know what you think in the comments area. For more, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Click the following video that appears on your screen as well. You'll like it.